My wife, Emily, has a 17-year-old son, James, from her previous marriage. We've been married for 12 years now, and to be honest, James and I have never really clicked. It's not that we hate each other, it's just tense. Always has been. When I met Emily, she was freshly out of her marriage. Her ex-husband, Dan, had cheated on her with a coworker, and that was the end of it. They shared custody of James, so he spent half his time with us and half with his dad. At first, I tried really hard to bond with him. Too hard, maybe. I'd take him to baseball games, try to talk about school, offer to help with homework, but the more I tried, the more distant he became. Eventually, I realized my effort was doing the opposite of what I wanted, so I backed off. Over time, we reached a silent truce. I didn't push, and he didn't act out. We existed. That was it. Emily and I went on to have 3 children together, 2 boys and a girl. James never really connected with them either. He wasn't cruel or rude, just distant. He preferred being with Dan's side of the family, his stepbrothers from Dan's new marriage. And honestly, that was fine. Kids find comfort where they feel they belong. Financially, Emily and I were doing well. Early in our marriage, we made a deal. I'd handle 80% of the college savings for our 3 kids, while she'd take care of James's entire college fund on her own. It felt fair. After all, James had 2 biological parents already. We didn't know if Dan was saving for him, but we figured Emily's contribution would ensure James got something. For years, that plan worked smoothly, until last month. Emily sat James down to tell him about the college fund she'd built for him. At first he was thrilled. Then he asked how much the younger kids had saved up. Emily, being honest to a fault, told him. That was the moment everything changed. When James realized the other kids had more in their funds, he got angry. I mean furious. He demanded to know why I hadn't put anything toward his education. Emily tried to explain the arrangement, how she handled his fund while I handled the others. But James wasn't having it. "So you've been playing dad all these years," he said. "But when it comes to money, I'm not really family, huh?" Those words stung more than I expected. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the picture frames shook. Later that night, Emily suggested we could take a small portion out of our youngest child's college fund and give it to James, promising she'd replace it later. She made it clear she wouldn't pressure me, that it was my call. But the truth? I didn't want to do it. It wasn't just about the money. It was about what it represented. For years, James had idolized his father, a man who cheated on his mother, refused therapy, and barely showed up for important milestones. And yet, somehow, I was always the villain in his eyes. I never resented the kid, but his constant rejection wore me down. I tried to be a good stepdad. But when he told me I wasn't family unless there was money involved, something inside me snapped. Now he's angry. Emily's caught in the middle. And I'm sitting here wondering, am I wrong for refusing to give him a share of the money I saved for my kids? I thought the worst was over, but what came next would drag years of buried resentment and family secrets into the open. That night after James's outburst, the house felt colder. Emily sat on the couch, her face pale and tired, while I stood by the window staring at nothing. "He's just hurt," she said quietly. "He feels left out," I sighed. "Emily, he's 17. He's not a little boy anymore. He knows I've supported him all these years. He's just choosing to forget it now that money's involved." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she rubbed her temples and whispered, "Maybe we could have handled it better." Maybe. But part of me couldn't help but think, no matter what we did, James would have found a reason to resent me. The next few days were tense. James barely spoke to me. When he did, it was short and sharp, like every word carried anger. He avoided his younger siblings completely, locking himself in his room or staying at Dan's house longer than usual. Emily tried to smooth things over, but nothing worked. That's when she brought up therapy again, something we'd tried to make happen for years. I still remember the first time she suggested it, back when James was little. She wanted him to talk to a child therapist to help him adjust to the new family dynamic. I thought it was a great idea, but since Emily and Dan shared 50-50 custody, both parents needed to agree. Dan refused immediately. He told Emily that taking James to therapy would mess with his head and make him think something's wrong with him. In reality, Dan didn't want a therapist exposing how unstable he really was. It was the same story every time we tried. Therapy requested, therapy denied. And every refusal chipped away at any chance James and I had to build a real relationship. When Emily and I got engaged, we tried again. Dan's response? He's fine with my new marriage. He'll be fine with yours. Then, when Emily got pregnant with our first child, she suggested it once more. Dan still said no, claiming James didn't need help adjusting. It was infuriating. Every time we thought about going to court, our lawyer reminded us that Dan technically wasn't breaking any rules. He wasn't neglectful, and James seemed well-adjusted, at least from the outside. If we pushed too hard, the judge might have even favored Dan in custody arrangements, so we backed off. We waited. Years passed, and the emotional gap between James and us only grew. He started idolizing his father, believing every word Dan said, including the twisted version of why Emily and Dan's marriage ended. Dan told him we were the reason for their family breaking up, that Emily moved on too fast. By the time James was 13, he'd started to look at me with open hostility. I'll never forget one particular dinner when he confronted Emily. He'd overheard from a cousin that Dan had cheated. Emily confirmed it, gently, honestly, but instead of understanding, James accused her of destroying their family. He told her she should have forgiven Dan and stayed with him for his sake. I watched my wife's heart break in real time. She asked him, "So if I had cheated on your dad, would you still think he should have stayed?" He looked her dead in the eye and said, "No, that would be your fault." That was the moment I realized just how deeply Dan had poisoned his mind. We tried again to suggest therapy when James was older, almost 18. By then, thinking we could get his consent without Dan's. But he refused, saying, "You're not my family, so why would I need family therapy?" That line hit harder than I'd like to admit. After all these years of trying to be in his life, I'd become the man he blamed for everything wrong in his world. And now, with college around the corner and money in question, it felt like all of that history had come full circle. He didn't want healing. He wanted compensation. But when Emily and I finally sat him down for one last talk, what James revealed that night made us realize this wasn't just about money. It was about loyalty and who he truly believed his real family was. Emily and I decided we couldn't let things keep festering. We'd been walking on eggshells for weeks. Every interaction with James was either strained silence or a sarcastic comment under his breath. The tension was affecting the younger kids too. Our 10-year-old daughter had started asking why her big brother didn't like them anymore. That broke Emily's heart. So we planned a family dinner. Just the 5 of us. No distractions, no phones, no running away. James showed up late, headphones in, eyes glued to his phone. He barely muttered a hey before sitting down. Emily tried to keep her voice calm. "James, we just want to talk. You've been upset, and we think it's time we all clear the air." He didn't look up. "There's nothing to talk about." "Then let us talk," I said quietly. "You can listen if you want." He leaned back, crossed his arms, and gave me a look that said he was only there out of obligation. Emily took a deep breath and started explaining, again, the college fund situation. How we'd made the agreement years ago, how she'd been the one contributing to his fund, and I'd taken responsibility for the others. James's jaw tightened. "So you admit you never planned to help me?" "That's not what she said," I replied. "Your mom and I worked it out to make things fair. You have 2 parents, both of whom could contribute to your future. I stepped in to help her with our shared kids, and she took care of you." He scoffed. "You're rich, though. You could have helped me too. You just didn't want to." There it was. The bitterness that had been building for years. Emily tried to reason with him, but he was already worked up. "You act like I'm the outsider," he snapped. "You 2 play happy family with your perfect kids while I get scraps." "James, that's not true," Emily said, her voice shaking. "We've always made sure you got the same treatment. Every birthday, every holiday." He cut her off. "Then why don't I feel like it? The room went silent. I wanted to yell back, to remind him of all the times I'd gone out of my way to include him, to show up at his games, to make him feel loved. But I didn't. I just stared at him, trying to understand how a kid I'd helped raise could hate me this much. Finally, I said, "You know what hurts, James? You only see what I didn't do. You never notice what I did. I've been here since you were 5. Every school event, every Christmas, every time your dad flaked. I was there. I didn't need to be, but I was." He looked up, eyes flashing. "You didn't do it for me. You did it for her." The words hit me like a punch. Emily looked like she was about to cry. "James, that's not true." He stood up, knocking his chair back. "I know you both think I should be grateful, but I'm not. My dad doesn't need to buy my love. He actually cares, that was it. The line that snapped something inside me. Your dad," I said slowly, "is the reason your mother cried herself to sleep for months. The reason you grew up in 2 separate homes. He's also the reason you never got the therapy you needed to deal with all of this." James froze. I could see the shock in his eyes, but I didn't stop. "You think he cares? He refused help for you. He made sure you stayed angry at everyone else so you'd never blame him. And now you're doing exactly what he wanted, punishing your mother and me for his mistakes." For a second, he didn't say anything. Then quietly he muttered, "You're just jealous because I'll never see you as my dad." He grabbed his phone and stormed out before either of us could stop him. Emily buried her face in her hands, whispering, "We've lost him." I didn't know what to say. Maybe she was right. Maybe we had. But the next day, when James's father called demanding to discuss the money situation, I realized the real fight hadn't even begun. The call came the next afternoon while I was still at work. When I saw Dan's name flash across my screen, I almost didn't answer. I hadn't spoken to the man in years, not since one of our awkward custody exchanges when James was still in middle school. But curiosity got the better of me. I answered. His tone was sharp and full of fake politeness. "We need to talk about James's college fund." Just like that. No greeting, no small talk. I kept my voice even. "There's nothing to talk about, Dan. Emily's been handling his fund for years. You were aware of that." "Yeah. Well, James told me your other kids have more saved than he does," he said. "And frankly, that's not right." I could already feel my jaw tightening. "Dan, I've been more of a father figure to James than you have for the past decade. If you're so concerned about fairness, maybe you should start saving something for him." He laughed. That smug, sarcastic kind of laugh that used to make Emily cry. "You really think you get to lecture me about fatherhood? You're just the guy who married my leftovers." For a moment, I was speechless. I'd expected hostility, but not that level of venom. "James told me everything," he continued. "You're hoarding money for your kids and leaving him out because he's not blood. You're teaching him exactly what kind of man you are." I took a slow breath, trying not to snap. "No, Dan. I'm teaching him responsibility. Maybe if you had done that years ago, he wouldn't think life owes him something." That set him off. He started shouting. Something about me brainwashing James, about how Emily ruined his family, and how I stole his son. I didn't even respond. I just ended the call. When I got home, Emily was already crying. "Dan called me too," she said. "He told James that I chose my new family over him. He said we're punishing him for loving his dad." I sat down beside her, speechless for a moment. "He's not going to stop, is he?" She shook her head. "No, he never does. He always twists things until everyone else looks like the villain." We sat there in silence for a while, both of us too drained to speak. Then I asked the question neither of us wanted to face. "What if he convinces James to cut us off completely?" Emily's voice broke. "He already has in some ways." Over the next few days, things spiraled. James barely came home, and when he did, he was cold and distant. He ignored the little ones completely. Our daughter tried to give him a handmade card, a drawing of all of us labeled family, and he just left it on the kitchen counter without a word. That night, Emily finally lost it. She went into his room, closed the door, and for nearly half an hour I heard muffled voices, first hers, then his, rising louder and louder. When the door opened, she looked exhausted. James, on the other hand, looked defiant. "He says he's moving in with his dad full-time," she said quietly after he left. I didn't even know what to say. Emily sat down at the table, eyes red. "He said he can't be around a man who only sees him as a bill to pay. That Dan would never treat him like that." "Dan treats everyone like that," I muttered. She didn't argue. She just stared at the floor. It was one of those moments where silence says more than words ever could. Years of trying to build something real, undone by one man's pride and another's manipulation. Later that night, Emily texted Dan and told him he could have full custody if that's what James truly wanted. Dan didn't even hesitate before saying fine. I went to bed staring at the ceiling, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: complete defeat. But just when I thought it was over, James came back a week later. Not to make peace, but to ask one question that shattered everything we thought we understood about family.